Following the chaos and dark whispers left behind in the wake of his time with Casimili, Babatunde vanished from his old life like a shadow at dawn. He resurfaced far away in Cape City, a bustling, sun-drenched coastal town with its wide streets, busy markets, and a population too distracted with their own ambitions to ask questions about a newcomer's past. Here he reinvented himself. He secured a comfortable position as an accountant with a multinational corporation, the sort of job that offered both prestige and anonymity. By day, Babatunde's charm and sharp mind made him a favorite in the office. By night, the city became his playground. He found his routine, and in it, a kind of power. Each evening, he would slip into the warm glow of Velvet, a wine bar across from his office, a place where the music was soft, the drinks strong, and the patrons ready to be entertained. Babatunde thrived here, with his easy smile, clever wit, and a pocket full of stories that skirted the truth. He collected conquests like trophies, each one feeding his ego, each one proof of the control he believed he could exert over the world. For Babatunde, Cape City was supposed to be an escape, but sometimes, no matter how far you run, the past has a way of finding you. And sometimes it comes in the form of a woman you can't quite conquer. It was here, in the heart of this seemingly new beginning, that Babatunde's path would cross with Angelina's. She was unlike anyone he had met in this city, beautiful yet principled, warm yet cautious. At 30, Angelina had everything most people spend a lifetime chasing. She was the IT manager for a major tech organization, respected in her field, with a salary that kept her account comfortably full. Her house, a modern two-story haven with soft lighting and quiet elegance, was hers alone. She traveled when she pleased, dressed in designer suits for work, and sipped coffee from cafes where the baristas knew her name. But for all her success, one void remained stubbornly unfilled: someone to share it all with. She wasn't searching for perfection, just a man who was confident, intelligent, stable, and preferably easy on the eyes. That Friday evening, Babatunde walked into Velvet and spotted her at a table near the back, laughing freely with friends. Her energy stood out, bubbly, warm, the kind that pulled you in. As always, Babatunde approached with calculated confidence, weaving himself into the conversation with charm and statistics, jokes and compliments. He ordered drinks for the table, watched for reactions, zeroed in on Angelina. To his surprise, she matched him, wit for wit, smile for smile. She asked questions, pushed back on assumptions, even teased him when he got too cocky. He liked that. He liked that a lot. Angelina was observing Babatunde closely. He was handsome in a way that drew second glances. His smile was quick and knowing, his humor sharp but never cruel. His career sounded impressive, his clothes were tailored, and he carried himself like a man who had long been acquainted with success. Angelina didn't fall often, but she found herself intrigued. Enough to spend more time with him, enough to want to see where things might lead. By midnight, the music picked up, and so did the energy. Under the flickering bar lights, they danced. Their chemistry was effortless, and when Babatunde leaned in to whisper something into her ear, she laughed. Not nervously, but openly. She trusted him, just enough. By 2 a.m., Angelina hugged her friends goodbye and left with Babatunde. They ended up at Babatunde's apartment. The place was just as she had imagined. Neat, stylish, expensive without being ostentatious. They sank into the plush sofa, their conversation flowing easily, swapping stories about work, travels, and life's odd turns. At one point, Babatunde reached for a bottle of wine, its dark glass catching the low light. "Share a glass with me?" he asked, pouring one for himself. Angelina smiled, shaking her head. "I've had more than enough tonight." He didn't push it. They kept talking, the hours stretching toward dawn. But then the air shifted. Babatunde's gaze lingered longer. His words grew slower, softer. His hand found its way to her right thigh. Angelina wasn't like the others. She carried herself with a grace that felt untouchable, her intelligence sharp enough to keep him on his toes. She had principles, and principles were a challenge. And Babatunde had never been one to walk away from a challenge. Still, he could feel the battle slipping through his fingers. Out of all his conquests, this one was proving the most elusive, the most difficult to bend. And that, more than anything, made him determined to conquer her before the night was through. Babatunde leaned back, his mind working quickly. If the direct approach wouldn't break through Angelina's armor, then charm and subtlety would. He let the heat in the room settle, pulling his hand away as if he had finally accepted her boundaries. Then, with a casual smile, he rose to his feet. "You must be thirsty," he said, his voice warm, friendly. "Let me get you something to drink." She shook her head at the wine he offered, her lips curling in polite refusal. "No, thank you. I've had enough alcohol for tonight. If you have any soft drinks, orange juice maybe?" It was exactly the opening Babatunde had been waiting for. "Orange juice?" "Of course," he said smoothly. In the kitchen, the cool light from the fridge washed over him as he pulled out a chilled bottle of juice. He glanced over his shoulder. She couldn't see him from here. From his pocket, his fingers curled around a small vial, the liquid inside catching the light. His movements were quick, precise, practiced. A small measure swirled into the glass, dissolving without a trace. He took a swig from the bottle before returning to the living room, his face the very picture of indifference. It started as a pleasant warmth in her chest, like the first sip of wine on a cold night. Then came the lightness in her head, not dizzy exactly, but as though the edges of the room were gently swaying. Her laughter came more easily, even at things Babatunde hadn't meant as jokes. She felt oddly relaxed. She didn't know that whatever Babatunde had put into the orange juice was now beginning to take effect. The leather sofa seemed softer under her, the glow from the city lights warmer, and Babatunde's voice, deep, smooth, filled her ears like music she didn't want to turn off. "You're so beautiful, Angelina," he murmured, his gaze locking on hers. "You don't even know what you do to me." She opened her mouth to respond, but her words felt slow, wrapped in cotton. "Babatunde, I told you. First date." I know," he said with a smile that was almost too charming. "I'm not rushing you, just enjoying the moment." His hand rested on her thigh again, moving in slow, careful circles. Normally, she would have shifted away immediately, and a part of her still wanted to, but her limbs felt loose, heavy, almost too comfortable to move. Somewhere deep in the haze, her principles tried to push forward. No, not tonight. But the thought lacked its usual strength. Her focus slipped again as his cologne, rich and intoxicating, filled her senses. Babatunde leaned closer, tilting her chin with a gentle touch. His lips brushed hers, light at first, then more insistent. She tasted the faint tang of the wine he'd sipped earlier. Her head swam, her pulse stuttered, and her body seemed to melt into the cushions. The soft creak of the sofa, the low hum of music in the background, his voice murmuring in her ear. It all blended together. Every second made it harder to remember why she had drawn her boundaries. Her breath quickened. The orange juice's lingering sweetness still coated her tongue. Babatunde's arm slid around her shoulders, pulling her closer until her side pressed against the firm warmth of his chest. She could feel the steady thump of his heartbeat, oddly in sync with her own. Angelina's mind tried to protest, to remember every reason she'd drawn the line earlier. But the thoughts were slippery, dissolving almost as soon as they formed. Whatever Babatunde had put into the orange juice was no longer subtle, muffling her instincts and replacing them with an unfamiliar, drowsy warmth. The room seemed smaller now, the shadows deeper. Her focus tunneled until the only thing that existed was Babatunde. His voice, his scent, the slow movements of his hands as if he were painting her with invisible strokes. She felt like she was falling into a black hole. Then there was total darkness. The first light of morning crept through the half-drawn curtains, painting the apartment in soft gold. The sounds of Cape City were waking up. Early traffic, the chirping of birds, the soft hum of air conditioners flicking on. But inside Babatunde's sleek apartment, the air was thick, still, and heavy. Angelina stirred. Her eyes blinked open, adjusting slowly to the unfamiliar ceiling above her. Her limbs ached. Her mouth was dry, her head foggy, As she sat up slowly, confusion gave way to a rising sense of dread. She was on the floor. Her dress was crumpled beside her. Babatunde's shirt hung loosely on her shoulders, something she didn't recall asking for or wearing. Her body felt sore, too sore. And then she noticed the blood on her inner thighs. A cold wave washed over her. Angelina scrambled to her feet, her legs trembling beneath her. She rushed into the bathroom. The mirror showed a face she barely recognized. Eyes puffy from crying, lipstick smudged, hair a tangled mess. She looked down again. More blood. Her stomach turned. What happened last night? She asked herself. But she already knew. Back in the living room, Babatunde was just waking up, yawning, stretching, as if nothing was out of place, as if everything was normal. Angelina's voice shook. Babatunde, what happened? He looked at her blankly. Nothing happened. We had fun. You were amazing. Her mouth parted in disbelief. I told you? I told you I didn't want to sleep with you. I made that clear, over and over. Babatunde chuckled. Come on, Angie. You came to my place. You danced with me. You even changed into my shirt. What did you think was going to happen? No, she snapped. I trusted you. I told you my boundaries. You ignored them. Please, he said with a dismissive smirk. You were into it. Don't act all innocent now. Angelina's heart shattered. She grabbed her bag and rushed to the door, tears burning down her cheeks. The moment she stepped outside, the sun felt too bright. Angelina sat on the edge of her bathtub, a towel wrapped tightly around her trembling body. The water had long turned cold, but she couldn't bring herself to move. Her thoughts circled like vultures over and over. The orange juice, the laughter, the dizziness, her voice saying stop. The force she could not resist, the pain. Her phone buzzed again from the bedroom. It was Rita. Girl, how did the night go? Did he turn out to be a gentleman or just another jerk? Angelina stared at the screen for what felt like hours before replying, Can we talk? I need you. 30 minutes later, Rita was at her door. No makeup, no judgment. Just a hug that Angelina sank into and finally cried without shame. They sat together in the living room, silence heavy until Angelina spoke. Voice low, measured, shaking. I told him I didn't want to. I made it clear. He just didn't care. Rita sat quietly, processing. Angelina, that's rape. I know, she said, her voice cracking. I can't even believe it happened. They talked for hours. Rita's anger rose with every detail. You should report him. That man needs to be behind bars. Angelina shook her head slowly. And say what? That I went home with him? That I changed into his shirt? Do you know what people will say? What if it gets out? My job, my parents, they'll never look at me the same. No man will want to marry me. In our world, it won't matter what he did. They'll blame me. But you did nothing wrong, Rita said firmly. I know, Angelina whispered, but they won't see it that way. Later that evening, the four women sat huddled around Rita's dining table late into the night. The soft hum of the fridge filled the silence between sentences, and the faint streetlight through the window cast long, solemn shadows on their faces. Angelina sat in the middle, hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched. Rita broke the quiet first. If you won't report him, then we need to protect you in other ways. Babatunde is dangerous. If he's done this to you, he's done it before, or will do it again. Michelle leaned forward. I've seen him at that wine bar, always with a different woman, always too touchy, too charming, like he's shopping. Abina scoffed. Charming? He's a predator. He knows exactly what he's doing. Angelina stayed quiet, the words sinking into her like stones in water. She hated the way his name now felt heavy in her mouth, the way his face replayed in her mind, even when she closed her eyes. Tola spoke softly but with fire in her eyes. Then we make sure no other woman walks blindly into his trap. We talk, quietly, to the right people, the bar staff, the regulars, the women we know. Angelina looked up, unsure. You mean, warn them? Yes, Tola said firmly. We can't take him to court, but we can take away his hunting ground. Rita reached across the table and took Angelina's hand. You are not alone in this. We'll be your eyes, your voice, your shield. Whatever he tries to do, he will find us in his way. Michelle leaned back and smiled grimly. Think of it as a network. He won't even know it exists, but it'll be there. And every time he makes a move, someone will be ready to stop him. They all nodded. It wasn't justice in the eyes of the law, but it was something, a small, fierce act of resistance. That night they swore an unspoken pact, not on paper, not in words, but in the locked gaze of women who understood what it meant to fight in the shadows. For Babatunde, the wine bar would soon stop being his playground. And for Angelina, it was the first time since that night that she felt the smallest flicker of power return to her chest. A month had crawled by since the night that had shattered Angelina's world. Babatunde, ever the predator of charm, had attempted to slip back into his old rhythm. Smooth smiles, casual banter, and the relentless pursuit of new conquests. But something had shifted. At the Velvet, where he once ruled the room with effortless magnetism, the air now carried a different weight. Conversations hushed when he entered. Clusters of women leaned into one another, their voices low, but their glances sharp. Whispers slithered through the dim-lit corners, his name riding on the edge of every murmured sentence. The knowing looks, the subtle shake of a head when he approached, the once inviting smiles now turning away. Each one chipped at the polished armor of his confidence. Still, Babatunde told himself this was temporary. He was convinced there was no web of gossip too thick for his silver tongue to slice through. In his mind, all he needed was the right smile, the perfect line, the next opportunity. But the Velvet had changed, and so had the eyes that now followed him. One Saturday afternoon, with the sun high in a cloudless blue sky, Babatunde was cruising lazily down the streets of Cape City in his black sports car. The warm breeze blew in through the open window, carrying the scent of roasted corn from a street vendor. That was when he saw her. She stood by the roadside, the very image of poise and beauty, a magnificent young woman in a flowing silk skirt and crisp white blouse, a black neckerchief tied neatly at her throat. Her skin glowed under the sunlight, and the red handbag in her hand added a bold splash of color to the scene. She raised a hand to hail a taxi, but Babatunde's instincts took over. Pulling up beside her, he lowered the passenger window, flashing his most disarming smile. Good afternoon, beautiful. May I know your name? She turned, eyes curious but guarded. Ijoma, she replied softly. Lovely name. Where are you headed, Ijoma? To visit my auntie. She's been unwell for some time. Babatunde's mind raced. What a coincidence, he lied smoothly. I'm headed in that direction. Hop in. I'll take you. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded and slid into the passenger seat. The car smelled faintly of expensive cologne and leather. By the time they reached her auntie's neighborhood, Babatunde had already coaxed laughter from her and slipped compliments into every pause. Before she got out, he leaned slightly toward her. How about we make this evening a little special? Dinner at the best restaurant in town. I promise you, it'll be a night to remember. Ijoma smiled, just enough to give him hope. All right. That evening, Babatunde arrived right on time, dressed sharply in a tailored gray suit. Ijoma stepped out in a black evening dress that made heads turn. He took her to one of the most prestigious restaurants in Cape City. Gold chandeliers, live jazz, and waiters who spoke in hushed tones. They wined and dined on the best food and champagne money could buy. By the time they left, the streets were quiet under the glow of street lamps. In the car, Babatunde's voice was smooth as silk. It's still early. How about we stop by my place for a short while? Ijoma hesitated, eyes flicking to the passing streetlights. Finally, she gave a small nod. At his apartment, she settled on the sofa, her red handbag perched neatly beside her. Babatunde poured drinks, a chilled glass of wine for himself, a soft drink for her. He sat close, close enough for her to smell his cologne. His words were honey, his eyes warm, but Ijoma took a slow sip of her drink, her gaze never leaving him. There was something in her eyes, a calm that didn't match the shy, roadside girl from earlier. Babatunde, oblivious, leaned back with a satisfied smirk. Tonight, he thought, would be another conquest. The night was quiet, the hum of the ceiling fan the only sound between them. Babatunde leaned forward on the sofa, resting an elbow casually along the backrest behind Ijoma. His voice, as always, carried that calculated warmth. You know, Ijoma, when I saw you earlier today, standing by the roadside, I knew I couldn't just drive by. Something about you. You've got this rare kind of beauty, not just what's on the outside, but here. He gently tapped his chest. Ijoma smiled faintly, her eyes flicking to his hand before returning to her drink. You're very smooth, Babatunda, he chuckled, feigning modesty. Only when the occasion demands it. And tonight, well, you make the occasion worth it. He shifted closer, his knee brushing against hers. She didn't move away. Encouraged, he rested a hand lightly on her arm, tracing small, deliberate circles with his thumb. You feel tense, he murmured. I can help you relax. She laughed softly, shaking her head. You think you've got me all figured out already? Oh, I do, he said with a grin. I've been with enough women to know when someone's interested, but just holding back. The words were meant to disarm her. She simply leaned back against the sofa, watching him with calm eyes, letting him believe he was leading the dance. They talked for a while, about her work, her travels, her dreams. She listened when he spoke of his career, his success, the comfortable life he had built in Cape City. The wine in his hand lowered with each sip. The soft drink in hers remained untouched on the table. At last, Babatunde leaned in, his breath warm on her cheek. I'm glad you came out with me tonight. His lips brushed hers, testing the waters. Ijoma didn't pull away. Her eyes closed briefly, her body leaning ever so slightly toward him. His hand slid to her waist, pulling her closer, their kiss deepening. One kiss became two, then more. Clothes loosened, whispers turned to soft laughter, and soon they were in his bedroom. Babatunde moved with his usual confidence, certain he was in full control. But as the night wore on, fatigue began to creep into his body. His rhythm faltered, his breathing grew heavier. He pulled back, muttering, I need a minute. Ijoma, still composed, smiled warmly and brushed her fingers along his chest. Oh no, Babatunde, she purred, her voice smooth as silk. You're incredible. I've never met a man with your stamina, your skill. Don't stop now. I want to feel all of you. The words were like fuel to his pride. His ego swelled. He pushed past his exhaustion, determined to prove himself worthy of her praise. She encouraged him at every step. Soft gasps, murmured compliments, little bites of her lip, each one making him try harder, pushing himself beyond his limit. By the time he finally collapsed beside her, drenched in sweat and panting for breath, there was a strange, satisfied glimmer in her eyes. The air in the bedroom was heavy with the scent of sweat and lingering perfume. Babatunde lay sprawled across the bed, his chest rising and falling in the slow rhythm of a man satisfied with his night's work. Ijoma, resting against the headboard, glanced at him with a faint smile before slipping quietly out from under the sheets. Where are you going? Babatunde mumbled without opening his eyes. Bathroom, she whispered, her voice smooth and casual. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, her movements changed. Her smile faded, her steps became sharp and purposeful. She locked the bathroom door, pulled her phone from her silk skirt lying on the countertop, and typed quickly, and pressed send. She didn't wait for a reply. She flushed the toilet for effect, washed her hands, and stepped back into the dim hallway. Instead of returning directly to the bedroom, she walked to the front door, and with a quiet twist of the handle, slid the bolt open. The door was now unlocked. She re-entered the bedroom to find Babatunde still asleep, sprawled like a man without a care in the world. Wake up, she said, her tone light, almost playful, shaking his shoulder gently. His eyes fluttered open. Again? You trying to kill me? He said with a laugh. Not yet, she teased, handing him a glass of whiskey she'd poured in the kitchen. Drink. For energy. Never one to turn down a drink, Babatunde took it in one hand and downed it in 2 gulps. You're trouble, you know that? That's what makes me fun, she replied, leaning over him, letting her lips graze his ear, her fingers tracing lazy patterns down his chest. Babatunde groaned, his body begging for rest, but her words stroked his ego as much as her hands did. "I just can't get enough of you," she whispered. "You're a real man, Babatunde. Strong, tireless, the kind who doesn't quit." It was all the push his pride needed. Gritting his teeth, he willed his body into action. Every movement was an effort, every breath labored, but he refused to show weakness. Until at last, with a final surge, he collapsed beside her, utterly drained. Sleep claimed him instantly. When he next opened his eyes, it was to a strange sensation. Someone shaking him violently. His mind was foggy, his mouth dry. Four faces hovered above him. For a moment he thought he was dreaming, their features blurring and sharpening under the soft yellow light. Then slowly, recognition set in. Angelina. And beside her, the same four friends from the wine bar, their eyes cold, their expressions unreadable. Babatunde's chest tightened. This couldn't be real. But it was. Angelina's gaze locked on him, her voice calm but edged with steel. "Babatunde, tell us about that night. The night you took me to your apartment." He opened his mouth, but the words stumbled out in fragments, barely more than whispers. His eyes darted from face to face, searching for some mercy that wasn't there. The once slick confidence was gone, replaced by a tremor in both voice and hands. I don't. Instinct took over, fight or flight, and Babatunde lurched toward the door, his mind fixed on escape. But before his fingers could even graze the handle, two of them caught him by the arms, spinning him back around with surprising strength. His feet left the floor for a moment before he was shoved onto the bed. He landed hard, the mattress swallowing his protest. His heart pounded in his chest. They tied him up to the four-poster bed. Ijoma leaned in close, her smile slow, deliberate. "No running tonight, Babatunde." Another voice, soft, almost sweet, added, "Tonight is your night. We're going to give you exactly what you've always wanted." The words hung in the air like the drop before a storm, and for the first time Babatunde realized he was no longer the one in control. The women took turns. Babatunde was helpless. When he could no longer continue, they injected him with a solution in a vial. It instantly re-energized Babatunde. At first, the vial seemed like magic. His body felt light, his mind sharp, his pulse pounding in his ears like war drums. But as the hours dragged on, the magic shifted into something else, a relentless, draining pull. His muscles ached, sweat dripped freely down his temples. The girls meant business, and they were relentless. By the time the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, Babatunde was sprawled across the bed, chest heaving, lips dry and cracked. His skin had a dull pallor, and his once proud frame seemed smaller. His skin looked highly dehydrated, like the skin of a 90-year-old man. His shoulder bone has become visible like a coat hanger. Even lifting his arm felt like a monumental effort. How are the mighty fallen? The women were already dressed, standing near the door, watching him. Ijoma leaned forward slightly, her voice almost gentle. "Now you know what it feels like to be used." And they all left. The words hung in the air as they left, one by one, leaving Babatunde alone in the wreckage of his pride and his body. His eyelids fell shut, not from the pull of sleep, but from the sheer exhaustion weighing them down. Every muscle in his body screamed, his breath shallow, his chest rising and falling like a man who had run for miles. Slowly, like fog lifting at dawn, the truth began to seep into his mind. This night, the one he had foolishly thought was some intoxicating dream, might very well be his reckoning. A dull ache throbbed through him, spreading from his bones to the very core of his spirit. It was more than pain. It was a crushing heaviness that hollowed him out from the inside. In that moment, Babatunde realized he would have welcomed the cold release of death over this relentless torment. A torment that was as much in his mind as it was in his body. He slowly slipped into unconsciousness, into total darkness. Babatunde regained consciousness only to be greeted by the harsh reality of the hospital room. It was the first thing that greeted Babatunde. A rhythmic, electronic beeping from a heart monitor was the soundtrack to his awakening. His right arm, heavy and sore, was tethered to an intravenous drip, and a plastic tube snaked around his face, pumping in a steady flow of oxygen. The sterile white of the sheets and the smell of antiseptic were a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before. Suddenly, the memories came crashing back in a torrent of noise and flashing lights. A blur of faces, the screech of tires, and the sickening crunch of metal. He squeezed his eyes shut, a silent question forming in his mind. How could I not have seen it coming? The thought was a bitter pill, a regret that settled deep in his bones. The days bled into weeks. The hospital room, once a place of confusion and pain, became a prison of his own making. Visitors came and went, but their words felt hollow. It was in this state of despair that a man with a gentle smile and an old, worn-out Bible began to visit. He wasn't a doctor or a nurse, but a preacher. He didn't talk about Babatunde's injuries or his prognosis. He spoke of hope and redemption. At first, Babatunde was skeptical, but the preacher's words were a balm to his soul. They were a lifeline in a sea of his own guilt and regret. He found himself drawn to the stories and teachings, a genuine interest blossoming in his heart. One afternoon, he found the courage to ask the question that had been haunting him. "Can God ever forgive me?" he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. The preacher didn't hesitate. He took Babatunde's hand and spoke of grace and second chances. Over the next month and a half, their friendship deepened. They talked for hours, the preacher guiding Babatunde through the teachings of his faith. By the time Babatunde was finally discharged from the hospital, he wasn't the same man who had been wheeled in. The accident had broken him, but the preacher's words had put him back together again, new and whole. He left the hospital a born-again Christian, ready to face the world not with regret, but with a newfound purpose and a heart full of hope.